I have an audience with the Pope and I have a knife and might be in Montevideo, but a quick look around tells me I am in San Francisco and Hugh McElhenney is tearing up the earth of the San Francisco pro football team's field. Okay, so the missionaries came and they tethered the native people to workstations in the field, and at harvest time these people got to keep some of the crop for their own use. So what? Big deal. Like it isn't the first time something like this has happened. I head out to Broadway while it is still afternoon. Busy in the streets. Cars parked all along the road. It will be much more crowded later. Broadway has stuff and people want to see stuff. Swing a happy lady high up in the air in a nightclub and other acts going on as well. Not the donkey act like in Tijuana, nothing like that here. Note to myself that this is a place of entertainment. Fishermen who have spent the afternoon at the concrete fishing pier walk by, a rough-looking type, no bounce in their step, just a gradual swinging side to side like the Fuller Brush man who would ply his wares on the hilly avenue I lived on back in the Bronx. Trader Horn of Rhodesia and South Africa reminds me of the Fuller Brush man. It is fall and there is no holiday going on, but the place is lit up like Holy Toledo, and although there are places of sin around and thieves and villains, it is still a holy place where people come to do their worship. If you walk by and touch a stranger shoulder to shoulder, you believe it is the devil himself. And the very next moment a lady walks past, there is a faint smile on her face. She is the Mother of God, you know for sure. It was not that unusual to hallucinate in the city by the bay. LSD was a common element. Armed with a full belly taken at a decent Italian restaurant, I stepped back onto the street and took to selecting my entertainment for the evening. Once again, the streets were crowded, but more so than before. The people seemed walking through an act of osmosis, mired to the asphalt and concrete in such a way that only their upper torsos would turn this way and that for a look around and then perambulate again after they had got their full of the sights glancing before them, customary as they were to only brief interludes, guessing beforehand what wonderful stories they would be bringing home to excite friends and relatives of their visit to the fabled city. God bless America, Fisherman's Wharf. Telegraph Hill, Franciscan priests to hear your confession, lady flying high swing in a bar, but no donkey show, no, not in San Francisco, the last of a long string of missions built centuries ago, and you can bet to see friars with rosary beads. Here in this surging of ambitious pursuits by people strange and perhaps a wee bit busy, I was taken to go into what looked like the least filled night spot and one much darker than the more fancy and alluring establishments. It was only identified by a pink neon sign in script stating, Flamingo, rough wood siding, a canvas material of dark green behind the windows, dried out dead flies on the windowsill. As I took my own seat at a small round table, the show came to a halt. A girl playing a guitar stayed in her seat, while the man, who I assumed was the flamingo dancer, stepped off the raised platform. Later I learned his name was Humboldt Xavier Manfred, came up to my table and asked in a pleasant enough manner if I had a cigarette. In those days, smoking was one of my daily habits, and I answered in the affirmative, offering him one of my Camels. He accepted, and while taking it and bringing it up to his mouth, said, almost imperceptibly, how he preferred the unfiltered kind, struck a wooden match, and started to smoke, while walking away. He looked pleased with himself, and I am sure he thought for the while that the world was certainly a good place, when even a perfect stranger would offer him a smoke and do nothing in the way of trying to engage with the remark, nonsense spitting out the mouth of one stranger to another. As the smoke filled his frame he had thoughts of Spain, aristocratic ladies, art before there was art, or artists skirting about in strange places. A man known as the Admiral of the Ocean Sea, who would use his sword to hack off the arms of drowning men he had thrown out of an open boat as an attempt was made to cross the waters separating Cuba and Hispaniola in bad weather. Emperor Philip was a fool, but not so the Spanish people. And these two gitanos, the male dancer and female guitar player, weren't either. They left the stage out of a side door, which seemed to be a clue for those who wanted to leave the show, that now was their opportunity. My drink was melting ice gradually as I puffed on one of my camels. I was anxious for their return, but anticipated it would be a long intermission knowing the cultures involved and the tendency for them to act fiercely independent. They would start up again when they damned well felt like it, so I could only wait, daydreaming about the Moors, the Alhambra, Isabel, and Ferdinand, migrant farmers in Southern California who these two may have very well entertained around nighttime campfires while they tried to recreate their childhood in Andalusia, the entire family shipping out to New York City and staying some time to get used to their new country before heading out to the Golden State. The beating and gesticulating youngsters of the hippie generation gladly embraced them, and they were soon able to make a secure living for themselves. When they returned to the stage, I was still thinking of animal drawings on the walls of Spanish caves. Oh! Before his boot first hit the floor and before a gargantuan pile of notes lifted off her guitar, it was the 14th and 15th centuries all over again, cast in the dark blue light of electricity. My head became 7 times larger than when at stillness, and I grabbed the edge of the table to ensure my sanity would stay with me. The bang-bang click of shoes on wood and the pluck-pluck twang of fingers on strings. The sound of castanets flailing the air. Madre de Dios. Corazon, corazon, venga, venga, ol. Ninos. Ay mama. Ay papa. For 10 minutes the dancer danced and the guitar player was silenced, then she played in solo, the ancient tones of absolution, while none in the audience understood any of this, but all came to it as if babes. When the players finished, exhaustion filled the room. The dancer came over to my table and asked for another camel. Another wooden match. He walked away. I got up. Left some silver coins on the table. The street was dark as I passed into the crowd. As ghosts and specters have a way of perking up now and then, the above story of gitanos came at me briefly many years later. It was the result of my becoming familiar with the CD, the Buena Vista Social Club. When the Bronx Punk, also known as the Cigar, took over Cuba, he spread his particular brand of hatred in that land, and as all poisonous regimes have done throughout history, he made it uncomfortable to be an artist, writer, or musician in that land. Some years later, a music producer from New York decided he would go to Cuba and seek out musicians still capable of playing the music of Cuba before it was stultified by the cigar. The results of that effort was the Buena Vista Social Club. Say African. Say classical and jazz. Latin American and Caribbean. They were all in the club's music. I was hit over the head with this fact when listening to a Manitas de Plata recording and recognizing some exact musical phrasing in both recordings. It did not surprise me. As a matter of fact, my response was, of course. The two musical heritages would meet somewhere. Plata, the hands of silver, and the social club, stealing when they could, a moment to play, when not in the clutches of the cigar. Let no one tell me it isn't so just because now, after 60 years, they have daycare and worker jobs. Even Hemingway had to leave Cuba as the executions mounted. In New York, the Daily News made good grist out of the takeover. Castro this. And Castro that. Che Guevara in the mountains. Buy a Che Guevara hat. Mama. Who were these dirty-looking men, anyhow? As the Cuban rains made the jungles piss, fire ants and killer bees stung the peasant working in the cane, cigar, and his men welcomed the new heads of state, Khrushchev the Fat not being the least of them. It looks like Trotsky made a home for himself up in Washington Heights, the Bronx, and maybe the cigar did too. What's the connection? All communists seek refuge clinging? Straight from the back page of the Daily News, play ball. If you want a good cry Cuban sourced, go to YouTube. Eco Beto La Cubana, Cuban-born composer and pianist. Malagueña and always in my heart should do the trick. Pay attention to the audience. They are stuck on him and he on them. Much nicer to look at than Cigar or the Hat Man. Ya mama. Ya papa. How far is Key West to Havana? I think it's just an overnight. Ask Teddy. He was chomping at the bit to blow up all of Cuba. He was such a nice man that Teddy belongs in a room with the hat man and the cigar. Play ball. Wasn't the cigar a first baseman? If you sail around the East Cape of Cuba setting a SE course, you will come upon a bay, soon to be known as Guantanamo Bay or Gitmo for short. Stick your flag in the land there and it becomes yours for all eternity. Go farther up the coast west of Gitmo and there is a much more complex bay. The Spanish gave the aim fits over the place, Santiago by name, but eventually they were beaten. After all, might makes right and right makes might. The good news is that right here in Cuba decisions are being made to fight the Spanish in the Philippines, and of course it becomes a fatal error for the good old USA. I remember once being in possession of an oversized book with the title, The Philippine Islands, Our Little Brown Brothers. It was not of great interest to me then, although it would be nice to have a chance for a second look. Cuba and the Main. The Philippines. Corregidor. Even the Buena Vista Social Club. But Cigar and the Hat Man? I would like to know how all this happened. I recall there being a great deal of mix-up over the Main and subsequent actions. It seems, not even the Rough Riders can get the genie back in the bottle.